All right, so welcome to Content at 8 podcast series Tribal Talks Cybersecurity Unlocked, where we delve into the journeys, successes, lessons learned, and best practices of the iGaming and sports betting industry. Having powered and protected the digital and global gaming market for over 26, 27 years now, I'm your host, Jerad Swimmer, Regional Sales Director for Content at 8, and I specialize in the tribal sector for American iGaming uh, industry. So, today we have James Siva. Man, I don't want to sound like I'm giving a eulogy or anything, but I'm going to go with all your titles. So, James Siva, Vice Chairman of the Morongo Band of Mission Indians. He's also the Chairman of CNIGA, Vice President of Tribal Leadership Council. Um, God, you've got so many accolades, and I'm just happy to have you on, James, and welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm always looking forward to an opportunity to meet with, great individuals like yourself who do amazing work for Indian country. So it's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, let's get it going. To kick things off, what's been in the top of your mind lately when it comes to technology in your community?
Yeah, so we've been really pushing for trying to incorporate technology, but do it in a way that's still grounded in who we are as a people, because I feel like a lot of times today, people are innovating just for the sake of innovating
Right.
instead of, incorporating technology to continue to satisfy the needs of the community, whether that's making, communication easier by going more digital and less paper-based, whether that's, and bringing in pieces of AI into our own tribal governments to increase efficiency. I think that's the biggest thing I've seen as far as back home. We have seen a rise of so-called innovation in different forms of gaming that I'm sure we'll get into as far as talking about the prediction markets in particular. That's
Yeah.
been the biggest thing facing us kind of externally. So it's a give and take where we try to incorporate technology internally to be more efficient and provide for our citizens in a more well-structured manner, but also wary of false innovation that's leading to the degradation of our industry, of our sovereignty and things like that.
Nice. So that being said, was there ever a moment where AI or cybersecurity went from the nice to know, but now we need to pay attention to this? Where would that have happened?
Yeah, for us here at Morongo, we had a very real situation where we had a cybersecurity breach actually happen. And I think that really changed our kind of thinking about it, from thinking about, something that's important and you're worried about, but making it really tangible in that moment and being like, we need to really step up our game on this situation and make sure we're protected in every facet possible. So, as unfortunate as that breach was for us, and we were more fortunate than others because other tribes have had, pretty massive breaches in the past and, really set them back. Ours was a little bit less intrusive, so we were fortunate there and we had a great team we were able to bring in. But that really changed our mindset as far as what we need to do and what questions we need to be asking moving into this space. And kind of touches on the work you're doing. This is really the kind of platform that tribes need to have so they can go to a trusted voice, because cybersecurity for a lot of tribes is a new frontier, and incorporating AI, obviously a brand new frontier for tribes, but we've never shied away from innovation. So I think it's something that we just have to remain grounded in as we start to incorporate it more into our governments.
Well, nice, and thank you for that. And I'm glad you guys were able to wrap your hand around that attack. And I have met your team, and very sophisticated, very robust team. You're always on top of everything there. So good for you all. Um, let's talk about why this matters for tribal nations. When you think about AI, where do you see the biggest opportunity for tribes right now?
Yeah, the biggest opportunity for tribes with AI might also be one of the biggest hurdles to overcome, which is the rapid growth of data centers. We see more and
Yeah.
more data centers popping up in traditionally underprivileged, lower economic status communities, which are, communities that still predominantly tribes are a part of. And so looking at, the growing need for data centers, and I always push back against that because I don't know if we need as many data centers that are being proposed out there. As much as AI is becoming very commonplace,
Mhm.
I'm a little worried that we're growing for growth reasons and not growing because it's actually the need of the consumer. It's so much more the need of the developer at the time.
Right.
But yeah, I think that physical component's important for tribes, but I also think tribes don't want to get left behind as we move forward into the new digital area and new ways of communicating and doing business, and even things that are commonplace for a lot of tribes like grant writing. Like there's tons of ways to incorporate AI into just making your grant process that much more efficient. But those data centers are such a hard topic to discuss because maybe there is potential for tribes to move into that, but also as stewards of our land, how do we approach that conversation? And I think we got to really take our time on those points. But AI is not something that's slowing down either, so it's hard to balance
Right.
the need for more information with that constant push and push of inclusion.
Yeah, and I know it here at Continent 8, we specialize in data centers outside of cybersecurity, and there's your hyperscale and then there's your edge data centers, but we aren't pushing the AI data
Mhm.
center because that's something that's still new. People are still building them and teaching them and all that, but that's not something we're looking into yet. I mean, it can be a good thing, but right now, so like there are a lot of tribes where I live in Oklahoma and all around the US, you know, with these outside non-tribal companies, these vendors, these sports books, these iGaming, they're wanting to work with tribes, but those tribes are telling them, hey, we can't work with you unless you have our data is on Indian land,
Yeah.
tribal land. Do you have data centers that, are on tribal land? And, a lot of people are like, no, we don't. So that's a big need, coming into it, which brings me into this, on the flip side of that, what worries you most about where things are heading? And do you think, two question here, two part, do you think people outside of Indian country fully understand the stakes here?
Yeah, and I think you touched on it when it comes to the actual data itself, and we have to figure out how does our sovereignty translate. What does data sovereignty look like? How do we start to enforce our sovereignty in this new world we live in? I think that's a big conversation, and I'm glad to see more and more discussion happening on that as a subject because I think that's the biggest threat too is, what happens to that data, who's in control of it, and how does that affect us moving forward, as far as sovereign nations, how do we maintain control of our own information, whether that's our information of our tribal citizens, whether that's information of our patrons and their personal data, just the massive kind of history that all these tribes have, translating that into, you know, digital information and making sure that that survives for future generations. How do we ensure that we own that? And more and more tribes are doing things like language revitalization and putting that on digital formats. How do we protect that as we move and work with vendors like you talked about? I've heard of tribes working and doing amazing projects around language with, groups like Google and things like that. And it's wonderful and I love it and I love it and I look to see more of it. But I just worry about you deal with somebody that big, how do you make sure that you're protected as a sovereign entity? How do you make sure your sovereignty is being extended into that kind of digital sphere? And I think that's a big threat, and I think we need a lot of work done on that area. But I know there's a lot of really brilliant people out there in any country who are looking at that and working on solutions for tribes. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Good answers. Good answers. Let's talk cybersecurity for a second. How real of a threat are cyber attacks to tribal governments today? Versus,
yeah.
we always hear about the casino side, but what about the government side?
Yeah, I think they're more real than tribes realize. Especially, I think, for some of our especially here in California, looking at the landscape, the reality is most of the tribes in California are smaller operations, smaller governments, more rural settings. And so, resources, it always comes back to resources. And do you have the resources to even engage in cybersecurity in any kind of level? But I do think tribal governments as a whole are probably more vulnerable than we realize. And we carry a lot of really important information, not just personal information, but cultural information. And so it's a lot to protect. And I think we all could do a better job. And, it's also that generational kind of gap, that some of the past leaders have been around for so long. I think it's a little bit harder to engage with the new tech when you've been around for so long and not had any incidents to worry about.
Yeah.
But I do think, everyone should do a deep dive and really make sure that you're protected, because it's just the same thing we do for our people every day, is protecting, their information, protecting them for future generations. It's just, data now.
Yeah. So, do you think more tribes are playing defense right now, or are they starting to get ahead of it?
I think mostly we're playing defense. I do think some tribes are being more aggressive about it and moving into not just looking at how you can protect yourself, but is this an area that has growth for tribes? We're always looking to innovate and move into new fields. So is this something that tribes can do, especially maybe helping other tribes along, because it's one of the things that eases that new kind of tech is learning from your fellow tribes instead of it being an outside vendor or an outside group who you're unaware of. Getting some information from a fellow tribe, I think, helps speed that along. So hopefully we see more of that as we move forward, to kind of tribes who've been in the space or had some activity in the past being able to help other tribes in the future incorporate new practices and look at cybersecurity as a real element that helps become a piece of critical infrastructure, because that's really what it is for tribes. Cybersecurity is as important as every other piece of infrastructure we build for our people. So just looking at it like that and changing the mindset around it.
Nice. Yeah, data sovereignty is a big thing right now. Everybody talks about it. We know it's very important. I mean, hell, for tribes, for us, it's been the most important thing since our existence. Ever since this land was, taken, and the history tells the story. But now I'm happy to see that more of the outside world is looking at data sovereignty and how big of a deal it is and how important it is. Just like you were talking about those language, I've had multiple tribes come to us because they want to preserve their language. There's maybe only a handful of elders left in their tribe that can speak it, and not really teaching it, but so they want to preserve it and put it in something like a data center so that it can be used. Now with AI, you can teach it. Anybody can learn it. But so, anyways, let's get this shortened up for you here. I do want to know, speaking about the future, I've always said, and this better than anybody, but one of the biggest assets for any tribe and what we're trying to protect is our kids, our future. Those are the future leaders. Those are the future CIOs, GMs, everything. So what would you want younger tribal members to understand about getting into tech right now?
I think don't worry about not knowing it when you get started. I think so many people look at the entire picture and they're overwhelmed immediately before they get started. Everyone's been there. There's been so much that's changed even since I've been in leadership. Don't be afraid to get in there and ask questions. Don't be afraid to get in there and make mistakes. That's why you have, a return button. You can always go back. You can always undo, because I think a lot of, especially that younger generation, I think we assume that they just absorb technology. And so if they don't get it right away, we're like, oh, we already starting to pass judgment on them. So I think get in there and make some mistakes, ask some questions. But also, if you know the answer, don't be afraid to put it out there. Because I feel like a lot of times, those younger people are really bright, really sharp, and they're just hesitant to, step in and be like, oh, I don't think that's right. I think this is the path we should go. And, you have a voice for a reason, and don't be afraid to use it. No matter your age or experience level, get in there and speak. That's why you're there. Leadership looks a lot of different ways. It's just not titles and positions. It's a mindset, really, is what it is.
Great advice. Great advice. Great advice. Last question for you, James. If we fast forward 5 to 10 years, what does success look like for tribes in AI and in cybersecurity?
Yeah, and I think we've touched on this. I think in 5 years, success looks for us to have a clear, agreed upon definition of data sovereignty and a whole concept behind that of how we approach every kind of digital asset underneath our umbrella of sovereignty. I think having that clearly laid out for Indian country, the same way that we move into, grant writing process or the 8A process or gaming, have a structure built out to know exactly what it looks like to protect your digital assets, your data in a sovereign way. I think having that laid out, having it clear, so it's not a thing we have to discuss and a concept we're trying to hammer out, have it clearly laid out, be like, this is the path for data sovereignty. And in 10 years, maybe having it formalized in the piece of legislature that this is tribes' right to control and own their data, just another recognition of our inherent sovereignty at the federal level. I think that would be the ultimate goal in 10 years.
Nice. Very nice. Well, James, I always enjoy anytime I get to talk to you. I love being around you. I think I'm older than you, but I always look up to you for your insights and your leadership. You're a great leader. And I want to thank you for joining us today. Your insights and expertise truly elevated this conversation, and I know our audience will find that value and everything you shared with us. So thank you for joining with us today. I
Thank you.
appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate being here today. It's been a great opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. And big thank you to our viewers and listeners. If you have any questions or would like to know more about any of our cybersecurity offering, please feel free to visit our websites, continent8.com, CH Secure, and you can contact me at sales@continent8.com. Take care, stay tuned for more episodes, and thank you again, James.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right.